Welcome to China Considered, a podcast that brings fresh insight and informed discussion to one of the most consequential issues of our time, how China is changing and changing the world. I'm Liz Economy, Hargrove Senior Fellow and co-director of the program on the U.S., China, and the World at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Today, we're going to speak with Dr. Chenjian Li, a renowned molecular geneticist who's on leave from his position as university chair at Peking University to spend time here at the Hoover Institution as research fellow. Dr. Li has worked inside both the Chinese and American research systems, and we're going to talk about how those systems differ and what those differences mean for the future of biotech innovation and global competition. Welcome, CJ.
Thank you, Liz, for inviting me. And I've been watching your this episode by episode, and I'm glad I can contribute. And thanks for everybody for tuning in and listen.
Okay, so let's start, from the big picture. You have the rare, really experience of having spent decades in both the United States and China as a leading innovator and leading neuroscientist. As you think about the systems, the research sort of ecosystems in both the United States and China, what do you see as the relative strengths and weaknesses of each system?
It's a great question. I think in discussing that, I want to put something right up front, which is China is developing very fast. So whatever we saw 10 years, 5 years ago may or may not apply to today. So I'm trying to add a dynamic sense of that. Uh, if I have to characterize the two systems, interestingly, I would say it's very similar to the economic system in which in the United States, the strength is really bottom up, grassroots innovation. And on the China side, it's really a government supported top down approach. For example, in the United States, almost every innovation comes from basic research that stems from decades and decades of professors' work, sometimes obscure, and nobody knows what this guy is doing for many, many years. And the society as a whole, especially the universities, just supported them for decades, and suddenly it boomed. So it's very grassroots oriented. The system is great. And that system is particularly good for what we call zero to one kind of innovation development. From non-existing, nobody imagined that, to it's actually may work. For example, in AI, in gene editing, all of that comes from decades of work that people used to laugh at the word in artificial intelligence, right? For decades, and suddenly it boomed. The United States is extremely good in that. Now, China is catching up fast, but so far, the way I think it succeeds is still in the not 0 to 1, but 1 to 100, that range. It's government support, and I should point out not only central government, but local government. And that is very strong. So, for example, if you do have a field that they think is important, for example, battery, uh, uh, green energy,
Mhm.
if they identify that as a particular field that is important, they pour billions and billions, and they're very patient. So that is what they are good at. But now I think China is learning from the United States in trying to strengthen the quote unquote 0 to 1 innovation side. So that's the biggest one I can describe.
So let me pick up on 2 points. Number one, how do you think China is strengthening the 0 to 1? Is it because it's investing more in basic research? Is it because Chinese companies are becoming more engaged in basic research? Or what's changed to make China become better at it? And then you mentioned sort of the past 5 years as a period of acceleration in China. To what do you attribute that sort of acceleration period?
Yeah, there are several things I can share. First of all, I think China uh, has been pretty strong, supportive in basic research from very early days. it was a matter of just no money, no expertise, and no international exchange. And with the things like a cultural revolution, it really destroyed that side. But in the blood, I think the appreciation for basic research has been there. It was revitalized after 1976 when Deng Xiaoping came to power and re-emphasized that science education research is important. And that has not changed in the administrations after Deng Xiaoping. So whether it's Jiang Zemin government or Hu Jintao or the current one, they pretty much support and realize the importance of basic research. So
Hmm.
that has always been there, but the support wasn't enough. However, in the past years, I would say after 2000, the re-establishment, the recovery phase basically was done, and then it's playing catch up. In some fields, it's actually leading. So now, government officers as well as people are seeing the fruit of supporting basic research. And I think the enthusiasm is now at another level. Plus, overall, the Chinese society is much richer than 30 years ago, right? It does have the resource to throw around. So that gives that practicality. Say, look, if you want to have a result, I'll give you 30 million Chinese RMB without blinking of an eye. So like, go ahead and do it. That is new. And
Yeah.
so it's a positive cycle moving forward. And of course, after mimicking, going behind people for a long while, people realize that why don't we innovate? I
Mhm.
mean, there's nothing stopping Chinese scientists and engineers from inventing something just new. So I think the combination of that makes now an unprecedented way of focusing both on the 0 to 1 and the 1 to 100.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been my sense that China's been very good at the sort of process innovation, right? Making things better,
Yeah.
whether it's making them run faster or be more efficient or whatever it may be, faster acting. They're very good at that, but they haven't been as good at sort of breakthrough invention, right? The sort of what you're talking about with the mRNA, based vaccine. That's, something that came out, as you said, of decades of research, in the United States and Europe that weren't really present in China. But now you're saying the fruits of the basic research are coming to bear. Are there particular areas where you see China as like on the cusp of that breakthrough invention, or where you would say they actually have already had kind of a breakthrough invention, something truly new has emerged?
There are several that in my field I know, but beyond that, I'll mention several. I think the green energy, battery science and technology are clearly seen by the world as very, very good. Rare earth material, I want to emphasize that it's not just a very wasteful, environmentally unfriendly thing. It's actually 4 generations of scientists in engineering, starting from Peking University, a professor, uh, improving the efficiency and how well it can be done. In my field, I can go deeper if you allow me.
Of course.
The aspiration of inventing, for example, new treatment, new drugs for combating human diseases has always been there. Remember, the only Nobel laureate from China,
Is a woman?
who's exactly Dr. Tu Youyou.
Yes, yes.
She is a women scientist. And remember, her work is entirely done in China during Cultural Revolution.
Yeah. It's
Unbelievable as it is, it's treating malaria. So
yeah.
the inspiration and aspiration has always been there. But for a long, long time, remember China's biomedical research has been lagging and was almost destroyed during Cultural Revolution. So from 1976 to year 2000-ish, it was a recovery time. But then after that, things changed. Just as an example, in the pharmaceutical industry that I'm most familiar with, so the first phase was doing generic drugs. Generic drugs are those drugs already on the market, been used, and the patent expired. So you make that. So that was the first phase. And then the second phase is called me too, me better,
Mhm.
meaning there is a target, validated, there is a drug, but I'm trying to make a drug which is either more effective or with less side effects. Somehow, me to me better. It's a little bit less challenging, but still very, very good. The third phase Chinese companies and schools experienced was called close follow. It's more advanced than the me to me better because it starts when the drug is not on the market yet. For example, if let's say Merck has a drug in phase two clinical trial, then a Chinese company say, looks like very promising, let's do it. So that's the close follow phase. And now I think many of the pharma or startups are eyeing on truly innovative first in class. And in our field, it's called a crown jewel, sort of that kind of achievement. And I can see a lot of people are doing that with government support, with private investment. So far, China is yet to come up with a true first in class, but I predict, given another 5 years, I will be surprised that there is no first in class. I expect that there probably going to be one.
Yeah, and I think China's always beating our expectations in terms of how fast they are to accomplish things once they set their minds to it. So it may even be faster than 5 years.
It could. Yeah, I know several of that, including one of mine. It's coming. What if
Oh,
we are
can't we claim years for the United States? I mean,
absolutely,
come on,
absolutely, yeah,
or
yeah,
we maybe it'll be a good sign of U.S.-China cooperation. You
yes, yeah,
yourself
yeah,
are a
yeah,
sign of U.S.-China
yeah.
cooperation.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and Liz, I want to add another one, which is even the 0 to 1 innovation. I will say there's a varying degree of difficulties.
hmm,
Some of them really, it will take a genius like Einstein, sort of Newton, that kind of people. Other ones are manageable.
uh-huh,
Dr. Yo too, she was looking at how to treat malaria, period. You do everything possible. And that kind of things, it doesn't need Einstein. It
mhm.
only needs pretty good people, really hardworking.
Yeah, maybe a little bit better than pretty good people, but sure, okay.
But then not only China, I think Europe, many Japan, Australia, they all have this capacity in
Right.
that sense.
Right. I think that's a really important point. So let's pick up on that issue of talent. One of the things that people in the United States tend to obsess over is, when we see these big numbers, right? So China's graduating, 4 million STEM students annually, compared to 800,000 here in the United States, of whom, many are also from China, by the way. At the same time, China has a big youth unemployment problem. We know somewhere running between 15 and 20% over the past few years, with a lot of graduates who can't find work. What is the reality of sort of the China sort of STEM student talent pool? First of all, are those 4 million all sort of first in class graduates, or is there a range, an array kind of scientific ability, research ability, and does it include people, for example, who've finished 2 years of an engineering degree or something like that? And then what about the match between the 4 million STEM students and the labor market in China? Is there room for all of them to be employed, or are those high youth unemployment statistics, related to, people like me, social scientists, and others who simply can't find jobs?
Well, you have a very good grasp at science and technology questions too, Liz. I think this question actually can be subdivided into several sub-questions. One is we compare the most innovative group of layer of people. which people, I mean, here and globally look at that. But there's also the next layer of good engineering uh, students and engineers who can carry out not that creative, but enough and important solid work, right? So these are very different. So I think it would be fair to compare the top tier to top tier, middle to middle. In the top tier sort of students and talents, I would say United States is still dominant. You and I, we are blessed to be at a place as at Stanford, right? And I was lucky enough to work at a Rockefeller University. That is a teeny tiny institution with 72 labs, but we had 26 Nobel laureates in
Yeah,
the
I mean, it's
past
an
100
incredible
years.
research institution.
And
Absolutely.
unbelievable. And I worked at Cornell, Mount Sinai. So the top tier to top tier, I think United States is still better in that sense, the most creative ones. Now, I also worked at Peking University and Peking Union Medical College, another school established by Mr. Rockefeller in history. And I think top to top, I would rank Peking University, Tsinghua University around 20 or 25 in that range compared to US elite schools. And that is very competitive. But still, I think there's a small gap there. Now, the next level is quite different a story. Chinese universities and technology schools are producing very good engineers. They are good at a particular field, particular technology, and they do that day in, day out.
Mhm.
And in that sense, that layer, I'm not sure United States has such a big advantage.
Maybe no advantage, in fact.
I
Right?
hesitate to say
I
that.
think you can say it. I think you can say
No,
it.
actually, I honestly doubt that because I don't have real experience in that, right? By the way, Purdue University, for example, established a new sort of school or department really focusing on the chip manufacturing.
Yeah.
So their claim is don't always just take pride in the design, in
Yeah.
the best cutting edge, but it's important to be able to produce it.
Right.
And I applaud to that.
Yeah.
United States used to be the country for manufacturing, right? Look at our steel, automobile, chemical engineering, pharmaceutical ingredients, everything. And now, in the past 30 years, I think US sort of gave up on that quite a
Right.
bit. And
Right. Yeah. I mean,
China's
we have no
gaining,
nuclear. We want to revive our nuclear industry, but we're hard pressed to find many nuclear
yeah,
engineers. We simply don't
right,
have that many
right,
schools that even
yeah.
teach that, right?
Yeah.
So,
Even
yeah,
chip engineers, right?
yeah,
So I think in China in the past 30 years really is leapfrogging
yeah,
forward. It just jumps up and up. So I think that layer, United States has some catch up to do
yeah,
because the economy system doesn't quite uh, reward the engineers, right? So those two are, I think this is how I feel in general. But in China, there is a very big unemployment problem because you produce so many college students and university students, but the job market is not as good as it was, let's say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I think the mismatch is clear and that has uh, caught attention by the government, by entrepreneurs and educators. But the solution is something I do not have. How can they solve the problem of unemployment? Because remember, last year, college grads were about 12 million and up. And how do you find jobs for all of that when the economy is shrinking? So
yeah,
that will remain as a challenge.
yeah. And what about the collaboration between academia, between the university and industry. I think this is a really important story in China, how ecosystems develop, right, from the university, to manufacturing, and just scaling up where the money coming from the central government can be quite crucial. Can you talk a little bit about that process in China, where you think how you think it works, and does it work as well as, for example, I think it does?
Liz, again, I like the word you used, develop, evolve, because it is really changing fast. Remember, in 1976, Deng Xiaoping says we need education, we need science and technology. But before 2000, I was it was a catching up. The real research that can be translated into a product came even later than that because you need about a decade to accumulate great research
Hmm.
that is actually not just fooling people, fooling ourselves, but actually can turn into either a chip or a medicine or a medical device. So I would say it's really after 2010-ish, there are enough good things that can honestly be turned into a product. So I would say for the past 15 years, that has been growing. And Peking University was among the first ones to even have a tech transfer office,
Yeah. Hmm.
as bad as it
Uh,
was,
uh-huh.
but it's learning fast.
Yeah.
So it supports people to do innovative work. Now, here is what the top-down system is not as flexible, supportive as that in the United States. Stanford is really one of the best examples of how things turn out to be from research to the development to a final product, right? Many of our graduates are really, really shakers and movers in different fields. And in China, it's been developing. So suddenly, the professors, when they're trying to establish something, they are now regarded as doing something irresponsible, extra. They're not looked down upon anymore. They are encouraged to say, well, yes, you can actually do that. And for example, the system that allows leaves of absence
Right.
was established only a few years ago. Surprise! Before, professors, when they do something, they have to do it sneakily, right?
Mhm.
You have your day job and you're 100%. Now you can actually say, look, I need a year off to get a startup working. All that came within the past 10 years, and they're
Yeah.
catching up fast. I want to tell you something recently that I think developed in China, and I think is extremely powerful and potentially important, which is what I called the Bridge Over Troubled Water project. So for us professors to go from basic research, publishing great papers, to an actual project development, to a product, whether it's a drug or device, the first phase is always the hardest for us. That is the time we need some funding to move from a laboratory to a startup company. And the amount varies between, let's say, 500,000 to 2 million to about no more than 5 million US dollars. That usually is a very hard obstacle for us because, I mean, Stanford professors are not poor, but coming up with $5 million, put it on a project, it's hard. Here we usually use angel investors, right? That way of supporting it. It's a totally market economy. But in China, they're not doing it slightly differently. So it's a government support plus investment. And the way they do it is we'll give you the money you need and as a grant. Now, we all know 90 to 95% of startups go bankrupt within 5 years. And they say, that's okay. We understand that. However, if you do succeed, we want a share of your company.
Mhm.
So in that sense, it's similar to um, convertible notes kind of investment vehicle. And only thing is the government is doing it. The university is doing it. That I think is a huge booster because many professors will be saying, yeah, I will want to try it and I'll be responsible. No one wants it to be more successful than I.
Right.
However, if I fail, I'm not going bankrupt. I can
Mhm.
still have my regular job. I think give it 20 years, this policy, the bridge over troubled water or flying over the Death Valley,
Mhm.
two metaphors, I think it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, I still remember it was a number of years ago when Li Keqiang was in power. He instituted a new policy to let university students leave for a year or so to
Right.
do a startup. And I thought that is the beginning of a really big shift in Chinese thinking because, before that, I know I had done some interviews in China with technologists, and they would say, none of the Chinese parents wants their child to go and do a startup to try to be an entrepreneur. They want them to go work for a big company, either a Western company or a state-owned enterprise, and have job security and make good money with good benefits. But I think when Li Keqiang, pushed forward with that initiative, it really began to crack open a system. In some ways, China has had forever, a very large entrepreneurial spirit, which had become, I think, encased in the political structure in a way that sort of sometimes smothered it. So I thought this was just a really interesting and important moment for the young people in the country to
Yeah,
think
Liz,
differently.
I can tell you an interesting story in that line because at that time I was the vice provost for Peking University and
Oh,
the dean of the Yuanpei College. We actually allocated a really big sort of a floor of a particular building to be the innovative center for students.
oh,
And
wow.
in my Yuanpei College, we were the first one to say it's okay if you leave for a year. No
Wow.
problem. We will support you
Huh.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I was very happy to see that the students actually, I think zero came out of that from those things. That's not the point. I think
Right.
the point is students at that age, they are daring.
Yeah.
They are actually writing their business proposals with great market analysis and all that competitor analysis. So these people, although they failed at their first project, but give it another 5, 10 years,
Right.
they were exposed to the entrepreneur kind of thinking, and they're not afraid of it. They
Right.
no longer look at Steve Jobs as a god, and they look and say, "Oh, actually, if there's a good idea, I'm willing to do it a second time." So I
Right.
think just to supplement your
Yeah.
observation with
No,
it,
and they don't need to look at Steve Jobs anymore anyway. They've got Jack Ma. They have their own, sort of stars, homegrown
yeah,
entrepreneurs who've really done exceptional things. So I want to switch gears a little bit to an issue that I know you've thought a lot about and have some, concerns about, and that is the sort of over reliance of the United States and much of the rest of the world on Chinese APIs. Talk to us about the issue here. What is the problem that you see?
okay. Liz, let's clarify the abbreviation API for the audience because most of people think in the computer sense.
Okay,
The API we are talking about here is active pharmaceutical ingredients.
thank you. Yes.
I think you're raising a very serious question. I think, if I may, on a personal level, Liz, it's actually, I feel a profound sadness in discussing this question because to me, medicine, treatment, these are the noblest and across humanity issues, right? And I feel the pain of discussing that in the context of geopolitical tension and risks. But we have to face it. So I think the problem is big. And I hope I'm not exaggerating because I do think it's as serious as weapons of mass destruction. In a sense, because those atomic weapons and all that, they're horrible. But the drugs we're talking about affects 80% of population, whether it's United States or other countries, including China. That's what API, active pharmaceutical ingredients, is about. The daily drugs like ibuprofen, the mundane ones are sleeping pills, or let's say one has needs appendicitis. It's such a small surgery. What about the ketamine, the
Mm,
anesthetics? If you go for a CT scan, what about the contrasting agents? So these are the things we're talking about. And I think there was a uh, figure by FDA that people above 65 years old in the United States, I think it was 85 or 90% of people take at least one drug, at
mm,
least.
mhm,
So this is what we are talking about. If there is a breakage in the supply chain, we are talking about 80% of people will be affected. And the question goes beyond the United States. It's Canada, it's Australia. And to be serious, I think if we have such a kind of unfortunate situation, poor countries will suffer even more because the price will go up like crazy. And the United States and Europe are probably okay because we can put up with higher price. But what about African countries? So I think the question is really beyond US-China geopolitical.
mhm.
Now, I see the problem is globally, I just feel for such critical things, chemicals and APIs, to be so heavily depending on one place,
Right.
that is dangerous. In the United States, we have so many drugs and APIs, let's say 70, 80% is dependent on import. United States used to make all of them
Yeah.
right in New Jersey.
Mm,
Then it was shifted to other countries, India being one. And then, interestingly, it started a race to the bottom of economy because
mhm.
it's not that profitable. So whoever can make it cheaper and equal quality wins. And
Yeah.
given 30 years, Chinese companies are doing extremely well. They're making products for Merck, Pfizer,
Right.
AstraZeneca. But if you trace back, it's all there. Now, geopolitically, it is dangerous, and not only for United States, but for other countries too. So I would think for such kind of things, it might be a better strategy to have more than one place that can produce it. In case it needs, then you can crank up the production. But how to do it, uh, I'm still
And that was going to be my next question. So what's the solution? I mean, what do we do from here then? How do we break this dependency? Because I think
yeah,
there are two different issues right at hand. One is something could happen within China that could be problematic. So maybe there's a factory explosion,
yes, yes,
and that provides some very serious disruption. And I think that is the sort of the global where it could have global implications. And we've seen both China now and the United States, weaponize their, sort of when other countries have dependencies on them, weaponize that kind of leverage. You could imagine, as it did with a little bit of the mask diplomacy during COVID, that China could choose to use the APIs, like it did with the rare earths, for example, recently, as a tool of negotiation with the United States or with other countries with which it's having a difficult political relationship. And that really wouldn't probably have as much of an impact in Africa or other countries. But so what do we do about it, I guess is the
yeah,
question.
yeah. I definitely acknowledge that's something I'm really trying to think hard, but I haven't found a
Okay.
good solution. But I will uh, tell you what I've been trying to explore. One is, of course, what they call the friend shore. If not United States, then India, some of the European countries, or those are the places, or Mexico could be places that we can have friend shore. So just don't put all eggs in one basket. That's the
Right.
strategy. The
Okay. I mean, I
second
think it
one,
makes a lot of sense. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, the second one, I'm throwing that idea out to be criticized. I think many people will say that's just not going to work. I think why not invite some of the Chinese companies to have a subsidiaries in the United States?
Mhm.
Remember, for example, Wuxi Tech was severely punished by United States government, right? Really, really hard time. The stock, I think, dropped to 92% within 2 days, something like that. And then US government says, okay, we'll give you 8 years because after looking at that carefully, it's, oh boy.
Yeah, we can't live without it,
Yeah,
basically. Yes. Yes. Oops. Big
yeah.
surprise. Yep.
But if you look carefully, Wuxi Tech is establishing factories here in the United States. So is Packaging, so are many other companies. I mean, of course, they have their economic reasons. They have their sort of incentive to spread the risk factors. But
Hmm.
in the United States, I think we probably should encourage them to do so because in case of something that we really, really don't want it to happen, those factories are actually in Texas, in Boston, and that will be a source of those drugs. Um, and I would say that's at least something we should think about rather than rejecting that outright as another kind of economic invasion. So I'm thinking maybe we should think about this a little bit more, although I'm quite uncertain myself.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really big question that I don't think the U.S. government has yet, I mean, has yet to address basically, and we
Yeah,
certainly have seen it in battery technology with CATL, and do we want Chinese companies that are ahead basically of U.S. companies or have abilities that U.S. companies don't currently have? To come here and to manufacture, to provide jobs, all good. But does that then stunt the ability of homegrown U.S. industry to develop? And of course, China's experience. We could say, can we learn from the Chinese experience in the 1980s through the
yeah,
1990s of welcoming that kind of foreign investment, but then requiring certain things from those foreign investors in
yes,
terms of R&D, investment or tech transfer or, whatever, manufacturing a certain amount in order to have access to the market. They put in many, many different kinds of stipulations for access to the Chinese market. And I'm not sure whether Chinese companies will be prepared to respond in the same way that many American and other multinationals did when China was just opening up, right? So I think there are some complicated questions, I think, around whether or not the United States and other countries, right, feel as though they need to have their own indigenous, to take a word that's
yeah,
often applied to China, indigenous innovation, indigenous industries, or whether we don't need to have that in every sector, and we should just, in fact, welcome the Chinese companies who are going to be providing us with both the technology that we need and jobs.
yeah.
So I think,
One thing, Liz, I want to give an example to you. I mean, just look at Tesla, right? Elon
mhm,
Musk in Shanghai. Chinese government and local government really, really opened their arms to Elon Musk. And basically, whatever you ask, we'll get it done next week,
right,
something like that.
right,
And their long-term thinking is just having you here. You train the workers, the engineers, and the way you do things. We learn from it.
right.
People can be transferred to the next Xiaomi
Yes.
or
No, I think that's
BYD, right?
exactly right. That's exactly right. And if you read Apple in China, the book that came out not that long ago, that's exactly what happened with Foxconn and Apple.
Yeah.
Foxconn based in China, though,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
and all of their engineers and all the training that Apple did then went out to seed many, many other parts of sort of the iPhone ecosystem, for example, throughout China. So it's a really fascinating story that does, I think, exactly what you're saying, and maybe a really important point to make in the context of what the US could gain from this process. So I'm really glad that you raised that.
Yeah.
I think it's a
And Liz, I do have a suggestion. Again, quite a premature one. I think we can select areas
Mhm.
and factories or companies that we really want to learn from. For example, if there's a company who does pretty ordinary things and just compete with US companies, we probably don't quite welcome that.
Don't need
However, if it's battery technology, which is dominant, we may want to learn from them.
right.
Another one I want to raise in awareness is China is no longer the one 30 years ago that basically people here always think that Chinese stole things from United States. True or not, today, I think there are some fields Chinese already leading.
Absolutely.
And for United States, I think we should be confident enough to learn from the best, whoever they are. It could be a Japanese company, it could be Chinese, I don't care. A Somalian company, if they do something the best, I will learn from that.
Right.
I think we should have this open-mindedness and confidence to accommodate and true modesty to recognize there are fields we need to learn from other people too.
Yes, I happen to agree with you on that point. I think, and the number of those fields will probably increase over time. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we better figure out our path forward, or we may relegate ourselves to, eventually to some sort of second tier innovation nation. So let's turn now for a couple of last questions. To the cooperation between the United States and China, and we've sort of started to move in that direction. You know, the challenge, and you kind of epitomize, you yourself in one person are a collaboration, basically, between the United States and China. But it has become, I think, increasingly difficult for American and Chinese researchers to collaborate in a number of areas that are considered to be somehow sensitive technologies. And that, I think, number of technologies has also increased over time. I remember when I was in the administration, and we had the small yard and the high fence, and
yeah.
the yard, as people kept pointing out quite accurately, the yard seemed to be getting bigger and bigger with more and more technologies, and nobody could quite determine. Every agency had its own list of what
Right,
constituted
right.
critical technologies, and so but how do you see, are there areas that where you would say, actually, U.S. scientists, for the sake of their own, development of their own industries, their own sort of fields here, should not be collaborating with Chinese institutions, or for reasons of national or economic security? So are there areas where you'd say, I don't think that's a good idea? Or do you think sort of everything should be open for some form of cooperation?
I think I'll go for the first one, which is collaborate in as many fields as national security allows. That's a difficult proposition. I'll come back to the caveat later. So let me explain. I think that's where I want to wear my global citizen hat.
Okay.
As a physician scientist, my career is devoted to treating patients, and they are Chinese, they're Americans, they are Venezuelans. I went there for looking at Huntington's disease patients. So in these areas, they really do have a global impact, a global participation. And I think United States leadership is not shying away from that, but actually be in it and be still a leader in that. in treating Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, I would not put a restriction in that cancer biology. I will say support them. If, let's say, China comes up with a next Nobel laureate for inventing a drug treating cancer, I will be very happy with it because it does not impact United States national security in that sense. It benefits everybody. So those are the groups I think just strongly I support collaboration. Now the next group, another extreme, of course, is purely, clearly national security sensitive, for example, materials making bombs or all those military ones. I would say it's natural. Nobody will allow other countries' people getting into it, right? Now, the middle one, that's interesting. How do we look at that? And here, the caveat I want to mention is the line between basic research, civilian use technology, and dual use technology
Yeah.
has been blurred more and more and more. For example, let's say math. That used to be the highest intellectual, sort of the most pure kind of
Yeah.
science. Now we know algorithm is in every AI product, in every missile guided, laser guided missile in Starlink. So the applied math thing, do you call it pure science or dual usage? I mean, how do you draw the line? I think that is the part I am hesitating and I don't have a great idea how to define that. Now, I have a second best solution to that. It's a practical second best, what I call it a poor man's Cadillac approach. It is anything that is publicly published is probably okay.
Hmm.
Publication, I refer to both academic journals as well as patents.
Yeah.
Because in both scientific journals and patent applications, we are required to detail our methodology so that, quote unquote, people with reasonable knowledge can reproduce it. This is a requirement. When I publish my paper on the top journal or even middle journal, this is what I have to do because I have to subject myself to peer scientists' criticism and they should repeat my results. If they cannot, I am in trouble, right? So in patent two, in patent application, this is a requirement. Now, for all these things, I will think, God, it's already there. I mean, it doesn't make sense you are keeping a secret. It's already there. Then I will not put too much of a restriction. There are, of course, government supported or military use. Those are the ones I will probably cut a very clean one. But as long as it's publicly available, I will not put too much of a restriction on that.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
mean, I
like,
think those are very wise words. There are probably still some technologies, even semiconductor technology, as we've seen, what one person considers to be something that should be export controlled, another person thinks, no, that's no problem. And so I think, there still, it can be very difficult, I think, to draw that line as you suggest. But I do think the sort of publication, using that as a metric for determining whether or not something, should be able, to be cooperated on and, by both sides is at least begins to, I think, address that sort of messy middle area that you're talking about.
yeah, yeah. It can be the first line of triage.
Yeah.
Then we go to the second, like be more detailed, right? But first line, I would probably use that one as the first approach.
So I want you to put for our last, question or so, I want you to put your policy advice hat back on again, and you've been so
Hmm.
good about offering, I think, constructive solutions to some of the thorny problems that we've been discussing. But one of the issues, you started off by talking about the differences in the system and the state, sort of driven top-down model in China as opposed to the grassroots bottom-up model of the United States. And I think for many people here in the United States, they've come to the conclusion or are arriving at the conclusion that the United States can't simply compete this way anymore. That massive state investment in China across so many areas that we saw, for example, in the Made in China 2025 technologies, those sort of 10 areas of critical cutting edge technologies where, both, as you say, the center and the local governments just, poured money into these areas. To the point that you had hundreds of companies around single products competing, and many could not survive. Nonetheless, right, they've produced some terrific electric vehicles, for example. But how can the U.S. compete in this environment? Because I would suggest that it seems like something is missing in the U.S. ecosystem today that would enable it to compete against this massively sort of subsidized Chinese machine.
Yeah. Great question. I do have several very specific recommendations.
Great.
Um, the first one is basic science funding.
Mm.
United States, especially after Second World War, had a booming science technology for decades and decades. That's because we actually have been putting a huge sort of funding resource to basic research. Those are the ones seemingly we don't know, we're not quite sure when it was studied, but then it turned out to be unbelievably powerful, right? So I think the basic science is important. And I think we win by having this deep roots of greatest science in math, physics, chemistry, biology, and engineering, computer science. At the beginning, I think science goes in a way that is different from technology is technologies usually have a pretty clear-minded endpoint in sight. Like, I want to design a robot that can do the cooking kung pao chicken. Okay. But science is when people studied, let's say, a jellyfish glowing protein called the green fluorescent protein. Nobody knows how this is going to be big. And eventually it turned out to be a Nobel winning thing. So I think the basic science is important. That's the source, the fountain of youth of all the other things. So that is one. And I think in that, as a scientist and physician, I would plead the administrations do not cut NIH funding, NSF funding, because these are our really true fountain of youth, fountain of innovation.
Yeah.
The second one is we should continue our support for translational work. And here I want to remind all of us, United States government has been doing unbelievably big, humongous government programs. We should not forget that, remember the Manhattan Project?
Yeah. Yes, of
It
course.
was $2 billion at that time. It was completely government support, right? The initiation of internet was government supported. The moonshot was initiated by Kennedy. All these are, God knows, billions in dollars of projects that actually raised our cohesiveness and challenge to the whole society, whole science and technology. And I would say those are the ones we should remember. United States government was not shying away from these challenges. It was, I remember Kennedy's speech, like, we do it not because it's easy, but because it's hard, right? It
Right.
was the famous
Right.
quote. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So I think we should continue that, and we need to identify the key areas. Obviously, we cannot do anything in everything, but there are key areas, and I think we should not shy away from that. And the third one is again another plea to the whole society, not only the government, which is United States is great because it really invites the global talents,
Mm.
right? For example, Chinese students here, 86% of the PhDs earned in United States state.
Yeah. They used to say, not
86%.
any, not anymore, not anymore, but yes.
So those are the people who made their contributions, and they identify with uh, the ideology even.
Yeah.
Now, it's the talents that make things work. So I would say US has been a magnet of attracting globally. If you're good, come over here and you have a chance. So I think that is so critical. I'm not saying homegrown Americans are not good at it. That's not the argument. I've taught at the best institutions, and I know how a homegrown kid is just great. But absorbing the global talents is something that make us great. Just look around, right? You and I, we're sitting on the same committee with Fei Li, the AI, like a really founding people. And where is she come from?
Right. Direct
And
from
Elon
China.
Musk,
Mm.
Sergey Brin, just again and again, again. I think it is important to welcome people around the world, not pushing them away. And I do want to add a specific comment on the concern that some of the Chinese students here actually returned.
Mhm.
Some people say, hey, these are the people who brought our technology, our knowledge back to China and help China grow. Yes, I don't deny that. China's science technology growth has a huge factor from that. And I don't deny there are a few malicious cases, stealing intellectual property, probably. But I will say by and large, it's a positive influence. And I want to remind people of one thing. The science development in China, it is a lot more than just allowing Chinese to make more products, to be innovative in making a device. It's actually a way of thinking that China's growth is really, really in need of that because the sense of science is it's about seeking truth relentlessly. You think about something and you believe the world is not what I think it is, it's actually what it is objectively. So you go for evidence, you do experiments, get data. When you have that, you always look at that with cautiousness, saying, I think I can have a theory explaining that, but I could be wrong. I'm open to criticisms, I'm open to counter arguments, and open to, I'm very at ease in criticizing my co-workers' theory as well as the other way. So that is really important for any society, for China to be an open society, to build the national consensus. So that is, don't forget that aspect. This is what people coming, the returnees from United States, they have been trying to bring that aspect into China. And I think it is important to recognize that. Not only, now they're able to make XYZ product. So I think let's be a little bit sort of more open-minded as a global citizen. I would say let's remember that too.
Yeah. So wonderful, wonderful words to end on from your mouth to, I hope, the White House, to the Trump administration's ears. I can't thank you enough for sharing, both your deep reservoir of knowledge, but also just your wisdom and your thoughtfulness as you put it, a global citizen and as somebody who really, I think, reflects, the best of both the United States and China. And I'm grateful to Peking University for allowing us to have you for as long as they will let us have you here at the Hoover Institution. So thank you, CJ.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's such a pleasure.
So if you enjoyed this discussion and would like more information and insights on China, please subscribe to China Considered via the Hoover Institution website or podcast platform of your choice.